and thank you for listening to today's episode of JATCast, the official podcast of the Journal of Athletic Training. I'm your host, Luke Donovan. This month we'll discuss 2 articles over 2 short episodes from the recent issue of the Journal of Athletic Training. The first episode will report the timing of stress fractures among soldiers during the first 6 career months. For the second episode, we will explore the findings of a study that assessed impact sounds across various foot strike patterns during running. As a reminder, the articles discussed today can be found on the JAT website, natajournals.org. And please remember that all content from JAT is open access to all readers, thanks to the funding from the National Athletic Trainers Association. The title of the first article is Timing of Stress Fracture in Soldiers During the First 6 Career Months, a Retrospective Cohort Study, authored by Dr. Joseph Kardouni and colleagues from the U.S. Army Forces Command and the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. Let's survey the scene. Stress fractures to the lower limb often develop in response to a sudden increase in repetitive physical activity. Given the mechanism and the nature of military training, which includes a rapid and sustained increase in physical activity during basic training, the prevalence of stress fractures are relatively high among military personnel. Although this notion is anecdotally discussed and accepted in the clinical community, the clinical presentation of stress fractures over time after individuals start a new rigorous exercise regimen is not well defined within the medical literature. Therefore, the purpose of this retrospective study was to report the weekly and overall prevalence of stress fractures within the first 6 months of time in the service among members of the United States Army. A data repository known as the Total Army Injury and Health Outcomes Database that includes medical encounter data and personal data on all active duty U.S. Army soldiers was used. A 10-year period between January 1st of 2005 through December 31st of 2014 was reviewed. International Classification of Disease, 9th Revision, commonly referred to as ICD-9 codes, were used to identify incidences of stress fractures being reported. The location of the stress fracture was also determined. In addition, the weekly and overall incidence across the 6 months time interval were calculated. Here are the results. A little more than 700,000 soldiers were included over the 10-year study period. Over this time frame, approximately 14,000 lower extremity stress fractures were identified within the first 6 months of the soldier's time in the U.S. Army. This equated to an overall incidence rate of 20 per 1,000 soldiers. When stratified by sex, men had an incidence rate of 13.7 per 1,000 soldiers, while women had a significantly higher rate of stress fractures at 53 per 1,000 soldiers. Stress fractures were reported during each week interval. However, a steep increase began during the 3rd and 4th week before reaching the highest peak during the 7th and 8th weeks. Following the 8th week, there was a decline in rates over the next 2 weeks before one final spike was observed at week 11. Over the 11th week, stress fracture diagnosis steadily decreased over the remainder of the 6-month period. The timeline of stress fracture incidence does align with the 10-week time interval of basic training, where the period of greatest increase and highest incidence occurred to 3 to 8 weeks after beginning basic training. However, there were 2 time points within the first 10 weeks that were of particular interest. First, the stress fractures reported prior to week 3. These are of interest because these injuries were likely induced from behavior prior to basic training, given that the physiological processes to develop a stress fracture take longer than a 2-week period. The authors hypothesized that the stress fractures observed during the first 2 weeks stem from those soldiers selecting to increase their physical activities leading up to basic training. The second time period was the decline occurring between weeks 9 and 10, leading up to that last spike in week 11. The authors speculated that this decline may be explained by the soldiers' desire to conceal their injury, given how close they were to completing basic training. Similar findings have been reported in other studies. It is also important to note that although the rates of stress fractures began to decrease after week 11, that the incidence of this injury continued across the entire 6-month time frame. Another key finding of this study is that women had a much higher incidence rate of stress fractures when compared to the men. However, men, and largely due to making up nearly 84% of the study population, had a much higher overall prevalence of stress fractures. Again, these findings are similar to other epidemiological studies. Overall, the findings of the study do highlight the need to develop strategies to decrease stress fractures among military personnel and to be particularly suspicious of the injury early on during basic training. Well, that's it for today's JATcast. Please remember to rate and subscribe to the podcast, which is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, and Stitcher. You can find out more information about upcoming podcasts and other JAT events on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts at JAT_NATA. Thank you for listening and keep a lookout for next JATcast episode.